Hello. I want to tell you a story about one of the most mysterious and determined women in Canadian and American history. This is a true story told by me, Elma Schemenauer. I sometimes call myself Elma Mary from the Prairie because I was born and brought up on the Canadian prairie. And there's my website. I've written quite a few books, and many of them about history. Lillian Alling was a Russian or Polish immigrant. It's never been clear which, but she arrived in New York City in 1925 or 1926. She got a job keeping house for a family, but she very, very seldom spoke. She would only speak when absolutely necessary, although she was able to speak quite good English. For some reason, she soon decided she wanted to go to Russia. And nobody could really figure out why. The family thought, well, maybe she left a child there, or maybe somebody needed her help there, or why they just didn't know, and they couldn't get her to tell them really. She started visiting the library whenever she had time off and looking at maps and globes and trying to figure out how she was going to get to Russia. Then you can see here, New York City is a long way from Russia over here. But anyway, she finally decided she was going to walk. She didn't have a lot of money. She was going to walk from New York City through Canada to Alaska. And from there, she was going to cross the Bering Sea, and Bering Strait here is not very wide. And then she'd be in Siberia, which is part of Russia. She could have walked through the United States for a good part of the way, but she decided that she wouldn't do that for one reason or another. She got herself a traveling outfit, a good sturdy warm skirt and a top and some winter clothes and some hiking boots, and then she set off. On Christmas Eve, 1926, Lillian crossed into Canada at Niagara Falls. And we get some information about her from that because the record is still there of her crossing. She said that she was in her early 30s, I forget the exact date, and that she was a Roman Catholic and that she was married. But she didn't say anything about her husband, and the people back in New York didn't know anything about him either. She started out walking, walked from early morning till night, covering about 31 kilometers or 31 miles or 50 kilometers a day. And it's pretty cold in Ontario in the winter. I know that because I lived there for a number of years, but she persisted. At night, she would sleep in a cheap hotel. Here's the kind of place she might have slept in. The walls need a bit of work. Windows could be drafty, and there's the chamber pot on the floor, which was a handy thing. If she couldn't find that or couldn't afford it, she'd stay in a farm building or a grove of trees. She wasn't too fussy. By spring, Lillian had reached the Canadian prairie, and there are the prairie crocuses, which is a sign of spring in the prairie, a long-awaited and eagerly awaited sign of spring. If anybody offered her a ride, she usually said no. She didn't seem to be too willing to accept help from others for some reason. Whenever anybody asked her much about herself or tried to get information, she would say, "My name is Lillian Alling. I go to Siberia." In the late summer of 1927, she reached Ashcroft, British Columbia. People saw her there and spoke with her. Not clear what she did there. She may have stayed overnight or maybe bought some food. Here we see Ashcroft, and this was on the Caribou Road, which was really not an actual road so much as a trail, and it had been built in the 1860s for the Caribou Gold Rush. It's the sort of purplish line that goes up here like this. But she started from Ashcroft, and she followed the Caribou Road up to Quesnel, and from there she went northwest. She managed to reach Dawson in the Yukon, part of Canada, where she stayed over the winter. It was winter by that time, so she stayed there and worked in a in a, I'm not sure what it was, an orphanage or a children's shelter or something. And she stayed there and worked. She took care of the children's clothes, washing and ironing. And she also did some cooking, I think. And at the same time, she was fixing up a boat. She had either bought it or somebody had given it to her, and she was fixing up a boat. In the spring, she left her job and followed the Yukon River through Alaska right out to the coast. And from there, she reached Nome. And people in Nome remember talking to her and did talk to her, and probably tried to talk her out of what she was trying to do, because the Bering Strait, I mean, even though it's narrow, it's kind of challenging to get across there. But she was determined to do it. And the last anybody really saw of her was in Nome. Did she actually reach Siberia that she was wanting to get to so much? And we really don't know why. We don't really know. There's no real proof of whether she did or not, and still no proof of why she so badly wanted to go there. But we do hope that she got there. Can't help but hope that. Lillian's story is one of 30 Canadian historical tales in this book, called Yester Canada, Historical Tales of Mystery and Adventure. It's available for $20 from Chapters Indigo Online, Amazon Online, and also Borealis Press of Ottawa. It's also in some bookstores, or can be ordered through them. Thank you very much for listening.